I am Jorge Robin. 78 years old, a man the world once forgot, but a name the world will never forget again. I still remember the night everything changed. It was raining. The kind of cold, heavy rain that sounds like time itself is falling apart. I was sitting in my daughter's living room, quietly watching the lights flicker on the wet street outside. My son-in-law Daniel stood across from me, tall, young, polished, the kind of man who believed money made him immortal. He cleared his throat once, then said the words that tore my heart in two. "Dad, it's time. You should move to a care home. You need proper attention. You're old now, old." That word hit me harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I looked at my daughter, hoping she'd stop him. But she just looked down, silent, ashamed, or maybe afraid. That moment, that single word, burned into my soul. He didn't see me as a man anymore. He saw me as a burden. When I stood up, my hands were shaking. Not from weakness, but from something deeper. Rage. But I smiled anyway. "Of course," I said quietly. "If that's what you think is best." I packed my things that night. Not much. A few shirts, a photograph of my late wife, and the old wristwatch my father had given me. I looked at it before leaving. The time was frozen at 11:59, almost midnight. Almost the end, or so they thought. The old home was a graveyard for the living, men and women sitting in silence, waiting for days that never changed. I spent the first week staring out of a cracked window, wondering how life could shrink so small. But inside, something was boiling. I remembered my wife's words. Years ago, when I'd lost my first business. "Jorge, when they count you out, that's when you count yourself in." That night, I stood in front of the mirror. I looked like a shadow of who I once was. Wrinkled skin, tired eyes, shoulders curved from years of defeat. But behind those eyes, there was still fire. The next morning, before the sun rose, I walked outside. The air was cold, the ground wet. I started walking, one step, then another, then faster. At first, the pain was unbearable. My knees screamed, my back ached, and every breath felt like glass. But I didn't stop. Every morning I walked farther. Every night I did push-ups in the dark, shaking, sweating, gritting my teeth. People in the home thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I was a man with a mission. Weeks passed. The pain became power. My legs grew stronger, my shoulders straightened, my lungs burned with life. By the 3rd month I was running. By the 6th I was lifting weights again. By the 9th I was no longer the man they had abandoned. I was the man they would one day kneel before. One morning, while reading an old newspaper in the library, I came across an article about a tech startup that had raised millions overnight. Young faces, big dreams, arrogant smiles. I smirked. I had seen men like them before, all flash, no wisdom. That night I took a notebook and started writing. Ideas, plans, visions, everything I'd ever dreamed of doing but never had the time or courage to chase. I called it Project Phoenix. Over the next months, I taught myself everything. Digital markets, AI, global investment, new age energy systems. I used the old home's dusty computer lab and free Wi-Fi. The nurses laughed at first. "Mr. Robin is trying to be Elon Musk," they'd say. I didn't care. By the end of the year I had a business plan. Lean, brilliant, and ruthless. I left the old home that winter, not as a resident, but as a man reborn. I invested the little money I had, slept in cheap motels, worked 16-hour days. Every rejection fueled me. Every insult became a stepping stone, and slowly, the world began to take notice. Within 3 years, Phoenix Global Energy became the fastest-growing clean power company in the country. By the 5th year, we were on the front page of Forbes, and in the 6th, I became one of the top richest men on the planet. People started calling me the Silver Wolf, the man who rose from ashes at 78. But money was never my goal. Revenge was. It was a crisp autumn evening when I finally returned to my daughter's mansion. Same driveway. Same house. Same man waiting at the door, Daniel. When he saw me, his face went pale. I was no longer the fragile man he once sent away. I stood tall, dressed in a sharp black suit, driving a car that probably cost more than his entire business. "Jorge?" he stammered. I smiled. "No, Daniel, Mr. Robin." He tried to speak, but words failed him. I walked past him into the living room, the same room where he'd told me to go to the old home. "I remember this place," I said softly, running my hand across the furniture. "This is where you buried my pride." He swallowed hard. I didn't mean—" "You did," I interrupted. "And that's okay. Because you gave me something no one else ever could." He frowned. "What?" "A reason." I took out a checkbook, wrote a number so large his eyes widened. "This is for you," I said. He hesitated. "For me?" I smiled. "Yes, to buy back your dignity. You'll need it." He looked confused. That's when I revealed the truth. I had quietly acquired every share of his company months ago. He worked for me now. The silence that followed was delicious. The same silence I had once felt in that lonely room years ago. Then I looked at my daughter, who stood crying quietly. "I don't hate you," I said softly. "But I needed to remind you. Never underestimate a man who still believes in himself." I turned to Daniel. "You once told me I belonged in an old home. But today I own the home, the one your company just built. Welcome to my world. Now every morning I still rise before dawn. I still train. I still walk miles before breakfast. Because revenge isn't about hurting them. It's about proving that you can't be erased. I am Jorge Robin, the man they sent away. Man who came back stronger, the man who turned bitterness into power. And when people ask me what I call my success, I tell them the same 2 words: sugar revenge, sweet, slow, and unforgettable. When you're old and poor, the world doesn't see you. When you're old and powerful, the world can't stop looking. After that night at my daughter's house, I didn't return to gloat again. I didn't need to. The news did the work for me. Every screen, every magazine, every investor conference whispered my name, Jorge Robin, the Silver Wolf of Phoenix Energy. They said I was the living proof that age is a weapon, not a weakness. But success comes with noise. Reporters wanted to know everything: how I'd built an empire from nothing, how I'd turned my life around after being abandoned. I told them the truth. Pain is the best mentor I ever had. Soon, governments wanted meetings. Billionaires wanted partnerships. And somewhere inside me, I felt the hunger again. The hunger not for revenge now, but for dominance. Because once you rise, you realize that revenge is just the beginning. Power is the real reward. I built Phoenix Tower in New York, 100 stories of steel and light. At the top floor, a single quote carved in stone: when they push you to the edge, build wings instead of falling. I worked like a man possessed. I hired veterans, single mothers, young dreamers, people the world had written off, just like me. and they worked with fire in their eyes because they saw in me what they'd lost in themselves: hope. Within 2 years, Phoenix wasn't just a company. It was a movement. We powered entire cities with clean energy, rebuilt old neighborhoods, and funded schools. But in the middle of all that glory, my daughter, Anna, appeared at my office one day. I hadn't seen her since the night I walked out. She stood there in the doorway, tears trembling in her eyes. "Dad," she whispered. I froze. For a moment, the world outside that glass wall disappeared. "I came to say I'm sorry," she said. "Daniel, he's gone bankrupt. He left me. I should have stopped him back then. I was afraid." Her voice broke. "Can you forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. My heart was a battlefield, half of me still burning with the memory of betrayal, the other half still her father. I walked to the window, staring at the city I'd conquered. Then I turned back. "I forgave you the day I left," I said. "You just didn't know it yet." She fell into my arms, sobbing. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. Daniel's fall was brutal. The man who once lectured me about weakness was now the one knocking on doors for help. And fate, being the cruel poet it is, brought him to mine. He stood at the gates of Phoenix Tower one rainy evening, soaked, desperate, hollow-eyed. The guards called me. I told them to let him in. When he entered my office, he didn't recognize the man sitting behind the desk. I leaned forward slowly. "Daniel," I said quietly, "life has a way of circling back, doesn't it?" He bowed his head. "I came to ask for a job." I studied him for a long time. Then I said, "You'll start in the mailroom." He blinked. "You're joking." "No," I said. "You once told me I belonged in an old home." "You'll start in the bottom floor of mine." For months, he worked there, sorting letters, delivering packages, seeing my name on every wall. Every morning, he'd see me walk through the lobby, strong, calm, unshaken, and every morning, he'd lower his head. That was my true revenge, not anger, not cruelty, just presence, just power. Years passed. I grew older, but never weaker. I kept training, kept working, kept living like time had to chase me to keep up. The world tried to put me on magazine covers again, but I declined. I didn't want fame anymore. I wanted legacy. I opened foundations in my wife's name, built a global network for elderly entrepreneurs. We called it Reborn, because everyone deserves a second beginning. And one evening, as I watched the sun set from the 100th floor of Phoenix Tower, I thought about the boy I once was. The man who walked into that old home, broken and forgotten. I smiled. That man was gone. In his place stood a storm. I picked up my phone, opened the recorder, and spoke my last public words. "To every soul who has been told you're finished, remember this. They only win if you believe them. So don't rise again and again until your name becomes a warning." Now I live quietly, far from the noise of cities, in a house by the ocean. I wake up before dawn, run along the sand, and watch the sunrise paint the sky. Sometimes I hear the wind whisper through the waves, and I think it sounds like applause. People still come to visit, young entrepreneurs, reporters, filmmakers. They all ask the same question: "What was your secret?" "Mr. Robin?" I smile and tell them, my secret was never a secret. I just refused to die before my story was done. Then I look out at the horizon, where the light breaks the sea, and whisper to myself one last time: fame fades, power shifts, but legacy never dies. Years after my empire reached its peak, People began calling me the grandfather of grit. It started with a single interview, one I never wanted to do. A journalist from a small documentary team came to my home by the ocean. She was young, nervous, holding a cheap camera and a notepad full of questions. "Mr. Robin," she said, "people around the world know your story. They call it the greatest comeback of the century. What do you want them to learn from it?" I looked at her for a long time before answering. "I don't want them to learn about me," I said. "I want them to learn about themselves." That line ended up everywhere. They printed it on posters, quoted it in speeches, played it in classrooms. Suddenly the Silver Wolf became a legend, not just for building an empire, but for proving that age could never cage greatness. The world began to change. Companies started hiring older workers again. Universities built programs for retirees who wanted to start over. And everywhere I looked, I saw people rising, people who had once been forgotten, now chasing dreams they'd buried long ago. I received letters from across the world. From a grandmother in Tokyo who opened her first cafe at 70. From a widower in Kenya who started a charity in his wife's name. From a man in Brazil who wrote, "Your story saved my life." I was ready to end it. Then I heard your words, that revenge is not destruction, it's resurrection. Every message felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that my story had become something larger than me. But legends, like storms, have quiet ends. One winter night, as I sat by the fireplace, I felt a strange calm in my chest. Not pain, peace. The fire crackled softly, and outside, the ocean roared under the moonlight. Anna was there, sitting beside me. She'd grown into a strong, wise woman, running the Reborn Foundation in my name. She reached over and held my hand. "You did it, Dad," she whispered. I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "We did. We sat there in silence for a long time, two souls who had walked through fire and come out shining. Then I said, 'Promise me one thing.' She nodded. 'Anything.' 'When I'm gone,' I said softly, 'don't build statues. Don't carve my name on marble. Just keep the foundation alive. Keep helping those who've been forgotten, because that's where I came from.' She squeezed my hand, eyes glistening. 'I promise.' The next morning I woke before dawn, like always. I went for a walk by the sea, barefoot on the sand, the waves brushing against my feet. The horizon was a line of gold. As the sun began to rise, I stopped, took a deep breath, and closed my eyes. I thought about every fall, every betrayal, every tear, and how they had all led me here. When I opened my eyes, the world was quiet. I smiled because I knew the boy who had once been sent to an old home had now become the home for millions. They say I passed away peacefully that morning, but I like to think I didn't die. I just became the wind, whispering to every lost soul who's ever been told they're finished, "You're not done. You're only beginning." Years later, every October 19th, the world celebrates Phoenix Day, the day the foundation was founded. Across continents, people gather, old and young, lighting candles and sharing stories of rebirth. They play a short clip of my final words, the ones I recorded in my office years ago. "To everyone who has been abandoned, rise. To everyone who has been broken, rebuild. To everyone who has been forgotten, remember, the sweetest revenge is not hate. It's living so powerfully that the world has to remember your name." The screen fades, the music swells, and the words appear. Jorge Robin, 1947 to forever. And in that silence, a billion hearts whisper the same two words that started it all. Sugar revenge, sweet, silent, eternal, the end.